Coffee and Careers with me, Gail Angus, the Careers Manager for the Adam Smith Business School. I'm joined in today's episode by my colleague Anne, the Careers Manager for the College of Arts. So thank you very much for joining me in today's episode, Anne.
My pleasure, thanks for having me.
So in today's episode, Anne, we're going to ask 5 questions that you can ask yourself for your future.
Okay.
Now, as well as being a qualified careers advisor and appearing on Channel 4 television, programme Vocation.
Correct.
Anne is also a qualified coach. So Anne, can you tell me a little bit about what coaching actually is and how that can help people when they're thinking about planning their career?
Coaching is an approach that's very much centred on the individual, and it's encouraging the person to be resourceful and to find a way to navigate their questions or their issues or their problems themselves, as opposed to being guided or given the direction by someone else that's encouraged them to look within themselves and navigate a solution by the way they would intuitively do it.
Fantastic. So last weekend in our Coffee and Careers, we tackled the topic of what do you want to be when you grow up, and we looked at how to actually start that career planning process. Now we know that students are at completely different stages in their career planning and in their career thinking. So could you share with us 5 kind of key things or key questions that students could ask themselves using a coaching approach to help them to tackle a career problem that they may have?
Yeah, and I've tried to think about this from a start to finish. So taking you from your initial issue or problem through to getting started or some way towards solving it. So the first thing that you need to do is you need to clearly identify what your issue is. Don't go with a big generalised approach like, I don't know what to do with my life. Try and think, well, what does that actually mean? Does that mean I don't know what I can do with my degree? Or does it mean I'm interested in working in creative and cultural sector after university but don't know how to get there? Is it as simple as I don't know how to start writing my CV? So try and get your issue as specific as possible. And it may be the case that if you're thinking about a big question, I don't know what to do with my life, there's maybe 5 issues, 5 specific issues within it, and you take them one at a time. You just start with one and you work through it before you go to the next one.
So that's breaking bigger issues sometimes down into smaller manageable chunks.
And specific is the key thing here. So then the second step is to think about what you've already done, because remember what I said about career coaching being, or the coaching in general, being an approach that encourages you to be resilient and to come up with solutions. So think about what you've already done, because you will have done something. You will have found out something or heard something or thought about something, and get it down. Don't have it all up in here. Get it down. Start correlating and collating the information that you already know.
So this is the thing of trying to figure out where you are now, and for students that'll be at different stages.
Absolutely.
So some of them, perhaps if you're right at the start of your career planning, you might not have got loads of information on it just now, but it's just trying to identify what it is that you already
are. And remember here, in coaching, it's very much about you. So don't worry about what anybody else is doing or where they are in the same question. You need to figure out where you are. So imagine a miracle has happened and this problem has been solved. What would you see, hear and feel?
Okay.
So this might seem like a little bit of a slightly airy-fairy or emotional type question, but it is important because career decision making is not a black and white, methodical, logical, all the time decision-making process. Quite often there's a lot of emotion involved in it. And especially when we start to think about the kind of jobs or where we want to be in our future, most people will want to be somewhere where their values are being used and recognised and where you're happy. And this question tries to get you some way towards that, about what actually makes you feel validated.
Fabulous.
So once you've imagined the miracle has happened, think about what's standing in the way of that ideal outcome. What are the barriers? What's stopping me from getting there? And again, get this down, write it down, because these are the things then that we need to work through. So each barrier that you identify, you just look at it. You look at each barrier logically and you go, right, what can I do about that? How do I move that forward? How do I break that barrier down?
So could that be for someone who perhaps is looking to get into a certain sector, that they're not sure where to actually look for those sorts of roles, or perhaps they don't have any connections? So it's actually looking at what are the things that they almost need to then identify an action plan
Exactly.
towards.
And where with question 3, it was very subjective and it was very sort of coming from an emotional point of view. The 5th question, the 5th step is, imagine you're at your most resourceful and a friend asks for your advice. What would you advise them to do? So this is taking a step back then from it being so personalised and looking at it a bit more objectively, because sometimes when we're giving advice, you can be a little bit more, you can have some more clarity sometimes than when you're thinking about what can I do. So what would you advise them to do? So what you're starting to get into here is your action plan. So you will now have a plan of the barriers that are standing in your way and what can you do to overcome those barriers, and then what would you advise a friend to do, and this is your action plan.
I think that's always a really interesting thing, isn't it? Thinking about what advice you would give to someone else on that topic. And I know when we do use this in career coaching and ask students this sometimes, someone who said they're completely lost and don't know how to tackle that subject, you say, well, what would you actually advise your friends? They do have some things down there.
Absolutely.
And when you take that emotion away from it and
Exactly.
think about it from your own perspective, people quite often do have some stuff that they actually think, well, I'd just advise them to take that first step and perhaps reach out or speak to someone.
What can quite often hold people back is fear. And when you're advising somebody else, that fear isn't there because the fear is for yourself. You don't have that fear necessarily for the other person. So it's a good technique to help you overcome that fear.
Perfect. Thank you, Anne. Could you quickly run through those 5 kind of areas then just as well?
Absolutely. So 1, what's your issue?
Yep.
2, what have you already done? 3, imagine a miracle has happened and the problem's been solved. What would you see, hear and feel? 4, what's standing in the way of that ideal outcome? And 5, imagine you're at your most resourceful and a friend asks for your advice. What would you advise them to do? And the last thing I would say when you're coming at it from, and the coaching approach doesn't suit everybody, but if you like the sound of this, the key thing I would encourage you to remember is that you are resourceful and you have a lot of the answers, but you might get to a point where you're thinking, right, I need a bit of advice around this, I need a bit of guidance and a bit of help, and that's when you come and see us at the Career Service.
Yep, so you can log on to glasgow.ac.uk/careers and you can actually book in and come and actually see a careers manager if you are stuck on any of those steps, but it's a great place to kind of get you started thinking about tackling some of those careers problems. So thank you very much for joining me today, Anne, and thank you for joining us at home. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe as well. Next week we will actually be tackling the role of luck in career planning. So last week we looked at a more strategic approach to career planning. Anne's now giving you some coaching questions, so some kind of big picture questions to help you to think about how you can plan yourself. And next week we're actually going to be taking a little look at, well, people say that they're lucky, so how does that actually play into career planning as well? So thanks again for tuning in and we'll see you again next week.